The Inuit keep their greenhouses warm without gas or electricity, even in the freezing Arctic. But one mistake can destroy it all overnight. Winter is coming fast. Act now, or your plants will freeze. No time to wait. Protect your greenhouse before the cold takes over. The Inuit use the sun, stored heat, and compost to survive the coldest nights. Tune in, because one wrong move could turn your greenhouse into an icy grave. No freeze greenhouse hacks. Most people panic in this situation, scrambling for electric heaters or pricey insulation hacks. Some spend a fortune on high-tech solutions, but others stay calm, like the Inuit, who have survived brutal winters for generations without gas or electricity. Their nature-based methods can turn any greenhouse into a winter-proof haven. If they can keep themselves and their food warm in Arctic conditions, you can do the same for your plants. But one ancient forgotten trick could mean survival for your plants. Nothing beats free heat, and that's exactly what the sun offers. The problem is, most people don't use it correctly. They have long understood that sunlight is a precious commodity in the winter, and they know exactly how to maximize its power. One of the first rules? Placement. Sunlight is only useful if your greenhouse is positioned to take advantage of it. Any seasoned cold weather farmer will tell you that the structure must face south. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and a south-facing orientation ensures that it receives the maximum amount of direct light throughout the day. This strategy, known as passive solar heating, is one of the most effective ways to warm a greenhouse without relying on any external power sources. But sunlight alone isn't enough. It needs to be trapped and stored efficiently. A properly designed greenhouse should act like a heat vault, absorbing and holding onto warmth long after the sun disappears. The best way to do this? Materials that function like a thermal sponge. Glass and clear plastic allow light to stream in, warming everything inside. Angled roofs help direct sunlight deeper into the structure, ensuring that plants in every corner get their fair share. Some traditional shelters even incorporate layers of translucent materials to diffuse light evenly, preventing cold spots and keeping interior temperatures more consistent. Another trick often overlooked is the use of reflective insulation. Lining the north-facing wall of your greenhouse with a reflective material can bounce sunlight back into the space, ensuring that no bit of warmth is wasted. This technique has been used in shelters to maximize every bit of available light and heat. Water is one of the best thermal mass materials available. It has an incredibly high heat capacity, meaning it can absorb a tremendous amount of warmth without overheating. Large barrels or tanks filled with water, strategically placed inside the greenhouse, act like natural radiators. As the sun heats the water throughout the day, it retains that energy and releases it gradually overnight, preventing the temperature from dropping too low. Stone and brick are also excellent choices for thermal mass. Traditional structures often incorporate thick walls made of compacted materials, which work in the same way. Dark-colored stones, bricks, or clay pots placed inside the greenhouse will absorb sunlight efficiently and radiate warmth after sunset. If you've ever walked barefoot on a sun-baked rock in the evening and felt the residual heat, you already understand how this principle works. Another little-known technique involves using black-painted water barrels. The dark color helps them absorb heat more effectively during the day, making them even more efficient at radiating warmth at night. Some structures darken certain elements of their shelters to achieve a similar effect. Most people think of compost as nothing more than a way to make fertilizer, but when handled correctly, it can double as a powerful heating system. Certain communities, along with other cold weather farmers, have long taken advantage of the heat generated by decomposition. Organic materials, things like food scraps, dried leaves, and manure, naturally break down over time, releasing heat in the process. A well-maintained compost pile can reach internal temperatures of over 150 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hotter than most people expect, and it's a completely natural source of warmth that requires zero external energy. The key to making compost work as a greenhouse heater is placement. Compost piles should be positioned along the inner walls, or, if space allows, within the greenhouse itself. As the materials decompose, they'll release a steady flow of warmth, keeping the surrounding air temperature. Some communities use insulated compost pits to help retain heat longer, ensuring that warmth is available throughout even the coldest months. For best results, compost piles need to be properly balanced. The decomposition process works best when there's a mix of green materials, nitrogen-rich items like vegetable scraps and grass clippings, and brown materials, carbon-rich things like dry leaves, straw, and wood shavings. Keeping the pile aerated by turning it regularly will speed up the breakdown process and ensure that heat continues to be generated at a steady rate. Some farmers take things a step further by incorporating underground composting systems, where the warmth generated by decomposition is channeled through small tunnels to provide continuous heat directly to plant roots. This method can be applied to greenhouses as well, adding an extra layer of insulation and warmth. Keeping heat in is just half the battle. Now it's time to stop the cold from creeping in. Block the cold, keep the heat. Windbreaks are one of the simplest yet most effective ways to maintain warmth. Trees, shrubs, and hedges planted around the greenhouse act as shields, disrupting cold winds and reducing heat loss. In areas where natural windbreaks aren't an option, artificial barriers such as stacked logs, straw bales, or even wooden fences can serve the same purpose. Studies have shown that a well-placed windbreak can cut wind speeds in half, significantly reducing temperature fluctuations inside a greenhouse. This means less reliance on additional heating methods and more stable growing conditions. For extra protection, some greenhouse designs incorporate earth berms, mounds of soil built up around the greenhouse walls. These not only block wind, but also provide additional insulation, keeping internal temperatures steady. Even with proper sun exposure, thermal mass, compost heating, and wind protection, heat will escape if insulation isn't up to par. Inuit mastered insulation techniques centuries ago, understanding that even the smallest gaps can make a massive difference in temperature retention. For a greenhouse, insulation is all about creating layers. Straw, hay, or even bubble wrap can be used to cover the interior walls, preventing heat from leaking out. Some communities incorporate layers of animal hides or thick furs into their shelters, an approach that can be mimicked with double-layered greenhouse walls filled with insulating materials. Another trick: reflective surfaces. Adding reflective panels along the walls can help bounce heat back into the greenhouse rather than letting it dissipate. This method is particularly effective in smaller greenhouses where every degree of warmth counts. First off, let's talk about wind. If you've ever stepped outside in winter and felt like the cold was slapping you in the face with a block of ice, that's because wind makes everything worse. The solution? Block that sucker. A solid windbreak around a greenhouse creates a microclimate, a fancy term for it's way less miserable in here than out there. Think of it like wearing a jacket on a blustery day. It doesn't necessarily warm you up, but it keeps the wind from stealing whatever heat you've managed to store. Inuit figured this out a long time ago, using natural barriers like snow walls, stacked earth, or even carefully placed fences to keep the worst of the wind from turning their growing spaces into permafrost wastelands. Not only does a windbreak keep the cold from creeping in, but it also prevents delicate plant stems from snapping under the pressure of relentless gusts. Inuit, much like the Amish and other off-grid masters, know that straw is basically nature's insulation. It's packed with tiny air pockets that trap heat and keep the cold at bay. Stack straw bales around the base of the greenhouse, and suddenly, a cozy fortress emerges. Want extra warmth? Throw some wool or blankets over the areas most likely to lose heat, like windows and doors. For those thinking straw is just some flimsy farm material, reality says otherwise. When winter's over, composting the straw provides another layer of sustainability, multi-use, low cost, and ridiculously effective. Some even take insulation a step further by layering wool between wooden panels, making the greenhouse's interior almost completely resistant to heat loss. Bubble wrap works just as well, functioning as a quilted blanket of warmth for plants. Cheap, effective, and far easier than trying to jury-rig a full heating system. Some greenhouse masters take it up a notch by incorporating reflective materials along the walls to direct sunlight deeper into the growing space, reducing any potential cold spots. Inuit and other off-grid geniuses know that dark surfaces absorb sunlight during the day and slowly release that heat back at night. By lining the inside of the greenhouse with dark stones, black barrels filled with water, or even just painting parts of it a deep color, a natural heat battery forms, keeping everything from freezing overnight. Some advanced greenhouse designs even incorporate thick adobe or clay walls, further boosting heat retention overnight. Not every plant is cut out for Arctic-level conditions. Some crops are just wimps when it comes to frost, while others laugh in the face of sub-zero temperatures. Choosing the right ones is key. Forget about delicate tomatoes or sensitive cucumbers. This is the season for the warriors. Kale, spinach, carrots, and beets. These guys don't just survive the cold, they thrive in it. In fact, some of them, like kale, actually actually gets sweeter after a frost because the plant converts its starches into sugar as a survival mechanism. Think of it like survival of the fittest plant edition. The names mentioned have been growing cold-resistant crops for centuries, making sure their greenhouses are packed with food that doesn't just shrivel up the moment the temperature drops. Root vegetables like parsnips and turnips are also great options, providing a steady food source deep into the colder months. Layering manure or compost under planting beds generates heat as the material breaks down, warming the soil from below. Horse manure is especially good for this because it generates a ton of warmth. Basically, it's like giving plants heated floors without the electricity bill. Some even build raised beds with insulation packed underneath, preventing heat from escaping into the frozen ground below. If an extra layer of protection is needed, cold frames offer a solution. Think of it as plants wearing a warm hoodie inside a windproof jacket. A cold frame is just a simple box with a clear lid that traps sunlight and keeps warmth in. Building one with scrap wood and an old window or plastic sheet keeps seedlings or fragile crops cozy, even when the temperature outside mimics the Arctic tundra. Some add reflective insulation inside their cold frames, maximizing the trapped sunlight to give an even bigger boost to growth. Some greenhouses still lose heat fast, but with the right design, winter won't stand a chance. Greenhouses that defy winter. While the rest of the world scrambles for new ways to cut energy costs, they have already mastered the art of growing food in sub-zero temperatures without a single kilowatt of electricity. It's not about being trendy, it's just about doing what works. Many off-grid growers have started integrating these practices, realizing that sustainability isn't about convenience, but about understanding how to make the most of what's available. Next time the cold looms, remember, somewhere out there, an off-grid greenhouse thrives, powered by nothing more than common sense and a little creativity. Maybe it's time everyone took a page from their playbook. With a few extra steps and a willingness to embrace time-tested techniques, greenhouse growing in cold climates is more than possible. It's a practical, sustainable reality. This same idea works for greenhouses. If one is placed in the middle of an open, wind-blasted area, keeping anything alive is nearly impossible. But placing it against a hill or tucking it into a natural dip in the land makes a significant difference. The earth itself acts as a temperature buffer, soaking up warmth during the day and slowly letting it out at night, keeping things inside more stable and livable. Building underground, or at least partially into the ground, is another trick worth stealing. When they build homes, they don't just slap something together on top of the permafrost, they dig into it. Why? Because the ground, especially when dug deep enough, stays at a more consistent temperature. Greenhouses benefit from this as well. Sinking the greenhouse a few feet below ground, or at least lowering the plant beds, helps trap warmth and prevents extreme temperature swings that could destroy delicate crops. Then there's the power of thermal mass. They understand that materials like stone soak up heat during the day and slowly release it when the sun goes down. That's why placing dark stones or bricks along the sunniest part of a greenhouse works like a natural radiator. To take it a step further, barrels filled with water can be lined up where they'll get maximum sunlight. Water holds heat even better than stone, and at night, it slowly releases that warmth back into the greenhouse, keeping temperatures stable. Compost is another unexpected but effective heat source. They have long understood that decomposing organic material generates heat. A compost pile inside or around a greenhouse can produce surprising amounts of warmth. As plant matter, manure, and organic waste break down, they create heat that can keep soil from freezing solid, providing a steady temperature for plant roots. Water plays another unexpected role in temperature control. They know that water absorbs heat during the day and releases it at night. By placing barrels of water around the greenhouse, they act as thermal batteries, soaking up sunlight and preventing sudden temperature drops that could stress or destroy plants. Then there's ventilation. They don't just build airtight shelters, they know that controlled airflow is key. Trapping all the heat without managing moisture levels leads to dampness, and dampness in freezing temperatures is a recipe for disaster. Greenhouses need the same kind of careful balance. Properly placed vents ensure that excess moisture doesn't lead to mold or plant diseases while still keeping enough warmth inside. Wind is another major problem in Arctic survival, and they have mastered ways to block it. They use natural barriers like packed snow, stone walls, and stacked supplies to slow down the cold air rushing across their camps. Greenhouses can benefit from this idea too. Planting thick shrubs, building wooden fences, or stacking rocks around the perimeter cuts down wind chill and helps keep the inside temperature more stable. Layering is another clever heat retention trick. Instead of relying on one thick layer, they wear multiple layers to trap heat. Greenhouses can mimic this approach by using double or even triple layers of plastic or glass on walls and roofs. The air trapped between these layers acts as insulation, preventing heat from escaping too quickly. Think of it like wrapping a greenhouse in a warm winter coat. Snow, often seen as the enemy of warmth, can actually be an asset. Packed snow around the outside acts as insulation, blocking wind and keeping warmth from escaping. It also reflects light back into the greenhouse, which means more sun for the plants and more heat being absorbed where it's needed. To truly appreciate the brilliance of these methods, it helps to break down each principle further. Understanding microclimates, for example, means taking a deep dive into how air movement and terrain interact. Even in freezing conditions, there are places where warmth lingers longer. A greenhouse built with this in mind can be positioned to take full advantage of these natural temperature differences. Finding the best site requires studying wind patterns, sun exposure, and how snow or ice accumulates in different areas. Using earth as insulation is another underrated tactic. The thermal mass of soil is impressive when used correctly. Greenhouses that incorporate berms, walls of packed earth, can benefit from nature's insulation, maintaining warmth even when outside temperatures drop dramatically. Some designs even integrate underground heat storage, where pipes circulate warm air from the greenhouse into the soil below, storing heat for later use. The principle of reflective heating can also be taken further. Inside the greenhouse, reflective materials can be used to direct light toward plant beds. Simple adjustments, such as angling reflective surfaces toward the plants, ensure that no available sunlight is wasted. The use of water to store heat can also be expanded by incorporating thermal ponds, shallow pools inside or near the greenhouse that act as massive heat reserves, stabilizing temperatures over time. Windbreaks deserve even more attention. They don't just reduce wind chill, they create a microclimate where temperatures are consistently warmer. The right combination of windbreak materials, such as dense hedges, stacked logs, or even snow fences, can make a surprising difference. Positioning these barriers correctly ensures that the harshest winds are deflected away from the greenhouse. These concepts, used individually, are powerful. Combined, they create a nearly self-sustaining system that requires little intervention. This is exactly how the Inuit have survived in extreme cold for generations. They don't waste energy fighting the environment. They harness its natural rhythms and advantages. Greenhouses built using these same principles can operate efficiently in sub-zero conditions, providing fresh produce in regions where conventional growing methods would fail. So, what do you think? Could we completely eliminate artificial greenhouse heating if we just worked with nature instead of against it? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay warm out there.